make sure that's situated, then we will get going. Alright.
Oh,
Alright.
let me.
You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with data on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 47, we're going to go around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. The Shock makes some drastic roster adjustments, which aren't really that big of a surprise if we're being honest, but we'll talk about that and where they can improve. The talent takedown brings the entertainment and trash talk. And of course, we gotta take a look back at last weekend's All-Star festivities. But before we can do that, we gotta introduce my co-hosts, and of course, thank all of our repeat listeners. And as you can tell, guys, like we actually have a full crew tonight. All three of us are here, so don't adjust your monitors or anything like that. You haven't fallen into like some alternate reality. We're actually all here, including Slambo and Spider, all at the same time. So now that we got that out of the way, joining me tonight, as not always, are my co-hosts. So first up, we have our YouTube wizard, Spider. Spider, the talent takedown was really something else, and while the matches themselves weren't the most entertaining, the banter that we got throughout the week leading up to it, and even during the match itself, just made it one of the highlights of this past weekend. But how's your week been overall, man?
It's been really good. I mean, we'll get to all the all-star stuff and all that, craziness that we got to see over the weekend. But I finally buckled down and did my placements on Friday for my main account, because I've kind of been playing that, alt account with friends and in the team that I coach and stuff like that. And I actually placed higher than I've ever been. So I'm up to 3674. So I am officially done playing Overwatch forever, because that's good enough for me. That's my goal was to get to Masters, and I firmly did that. Like last season, I squeaked in there. And this season, with the buffs to Soldier, I was able to get back and get a little higher. So that led me into the All-Star weekend, and Saturday was amazing. Saturday was everything we wanted to see out of pretty much most of the skill games, and then Sunday was pretty fun too, which we'll get to. But how about you, man? How was your week in and out of Overwatch?
It's been pretty good. We've been dabbling a little bit in Battle for Azeroth, so getting my Warcraft back on. Leveled my Druid up to 120, and I was gonna be like, yeah, I'm just gonna take it slow, and then like on my day off, I'm like 115, 116, 117, 118, 119. Yeah, I'm not going to bed. 120. So that was the thing, and I just hard crashed after that. So just gearing up to get heroic ready, so we can run some dungeons and start getting some more loot. Hopefully not repeat loot that I keep getting. But all in all, like the All-Star game, I think like the Saturday stuff was more entertaining to me than the actual All-Star game in itself. But we'll talk about that. But as you can tell, joining us again is my soulmate Slambo. And Slambo, you missed some pretty big news in regards to a certain sign-in for Soul. So first up, I want to get your thoughts on that particular sign-in, and what have you been up to in this past week?
Oh, what's up, nerd? And that's so kind of a two-part question there. So let's start with the boring stuff first. My week's been busy. We're kind of preparing for my daughter's first birthday. I've been doing a lot of travel lately. I've got a lot of just kind of little things that all seem to be coming together. Some family coming in town this week, so I've got to make sure my new house is extra ready in all the rooms that I normally didn't care about, that all of a sudden I need to care about right now. Those type of things. Boring. On the nerdier side, I'm having like my worst season of Overwatch ever. Spider on the inverse.
Give me your power.
I just kind of I'm kind of tilted, and so I've just let myself decay to diamond. 3000. I'm over it. I'm gonna kind of reset next season. But in the meantime, I've been looking for something to play that just kind of feels like that almost MMO vibe, because everyone else is playing WoW and I feel a little bit left out. So I picked up Monster Hunter World, and I've really been enjoying that so far. It's been kind of a nice just pick up, play for a little bit, and put down type of game. But man, not as much time to game as I would like to. And anyway, now let's answer the cool question, Toad. Let's go back to the big bucks. Fisher joining our squad, joining the soulmates. I'm of two minds here, Totem. Just bear with me. Is that on like that personality, on that swagger level, on that again, just purely on the personality. Just leave it at that. I'm very happy with this signing. I enjoy Fisher. I think he's a dynamic player and super fun to watch. But as far as how that play style fits in, that's the other part of me where I'm like, wow, I don't really know how this is going to look. I feel like we might be in a situation where we're looking at Miro all over again, if you will. So I don't know. I guess
that's where I'm at. So I'm excited. At the same time, I'm a little bit worried, a little bit trepid that it's going to be beneficial for the entire squad. But as I kind of remarked before the show, we don't know what other kind of moves may or may not be made, and maybe there's going to be a change of some other things or some change of the guard into something that's a new concept, a new play style, and he'll fit right in. Maybe a new hero comes out, and he's really good at that new hero. In fact, Wrecking Ball, spoiler alert, Fisher in particular, was on that Wrecking Ball, not always playing safe, but playing it quite a bit. So, he's out there experimenting. Anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, and maybe one of the adjustments that we'll see is maybe a little bit of Ryu Jehan on the Doomfist that we got to see in the All-Star game, which was absolutely destroying some fools. It was amazing.
Well, on a couple maps,
yes.
But yeah.
And then they started focusing him a bit more. But anyways, let's go ahead and let's jump into this week's news as we go around the league. So we got a new partnership that was just announced just in time for the All-Star weekend. And that is that the Overwatch League has partnered with, one of the bigger social media networks out there. Maybe you've heard of it. It's that, little blue bird known as Twitter. And while the terms of this deal was not disclosed, this is a multi-year content deal. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we'll be seeing some live stream content added to Twitter, as well as near real-time video highlights, which has actually already begun with the All-Star weekend. And with the start of the second season, the weekly preview show Watchpoint is actually going to be moving to Twitter and streamed live over on the Overwatch League Twitter account. Now, it's important to note, this is not the first time Twitter's, gone out of their way to partner with certain organizations out there. They have a deal with Activision for, Call of Duty Worlds. Same with ESL and their Intel Extreme Masters series. So, all in all, I'm okay with this, but, when it comes to, the live streaming on Twitter, the whole... I feel like the coding isn't the greatest with it, because I've had quite a few issues with it. I don't know if you guys have had stuff similar, but, I'm pretty sure NFL, live streams games over on Twitter, too. So all in all, we keep seeing these new partnerships popping up time and time again, bringing in more money into the league, which is always great to see. But where do you think this particular partnership is really going to lead with the Overwatch League? Is it going to primarily just be on that, highlight, type situation, or are we going to see something a bit more?
I mean, this is the best way I can put this is in the off season and into season 2, the primary goal of Overwatch League is to increase its digital footprint. Season 1 was the test. It was the inauguration. Season 2 is all about expansion. We're going to get new expansion teams. We're going to get new media for, consumption, all of that. And Twitter is a great place to start because Twitter has such a large user base. Now, as long as they keep the out of game stuff to Twitter streaming, that's fine, because I'm with you. That was one of my initial concerns, is I've had problems with other live streams that I've tried to watch, and just the coding and stuff has issues. But if they want to, delegate Watchpoint to that, maybe some interviews, stuff like that, highlights, I think that's the perfect place for it, because we already know, when it was on ESPN, how much, talk that it generated. I'll leave it at that. But that's all it is. It's just expansion for Overwatch League, and I think Twitter is the perfect place for it. And I hope with the increased usage of Twitter, I hope that leads to a little more banter, which we saw from the talent takedown. I hope that kind of makes its way into the actual league. So I think all around, we've talked about deals before. We'll talk about more down the line, I'm sure. It's just more money, and more money is better.
Yeah, I feel like the accessibility piece is super important for me. It's a very accessible, free platform for anyone to jump on. People are very active on Twitter for a number of different mediums. So, I'm good with kind of, where it is. It's not hard to get to. Just real quick on the coding bit, I've actually had a very good experience with it, but I've only watched a few NFL games, Totem, to your point,
Mhm.
and I would be most worried about those performing because there's a lot of people probably on those streams. But I really had very limited issues, and I can't really remember being annoyed by it. But that being said, I probably used it 8 to 10 times, so I probably might not have got enough repetitions with the Twitter video app to really give it a fair shake or not. But it's been pretty good. I was thinking about this as far as the Twitter move. The way I like this about continuing the engagement of the Overwatch League and its players in Twitter is I look at the NBA, and the NBA is very active on Twitter. It's a player-driven league. These are smaller rosters, and they're very interconnected with the fans. There's a lot of trash talk that the fans are even a bit a part of. And so Overwatch has a lot of things that are similar to that, and I feel like they have the opportunity to kind of play around in that space. And so really amp up the trash talk and the interconnectivity between these teams and these rivalries and these players, because you don't need to be the biggest league, because the NBA is not the biggest sport in America, but they are all over Twitter all the time. It's a very Twitter active, league compared to like NHL, MLB, or NFL. Of course, big players from all those sports have something, but anyway, so I just think there's an opportunity here to really make our mark on one of the platforms, and I think it's just good for the sport, and for us it just gives us like possibly some ammunition, some things to talk about pre and post game.
Absolutely. Well, moving on to some coaching updates, we did see some shift come in from the London Spitfire. So London have parted ways with one of their coaches, Chain. So we still have J-Phil and Gabe remaining on the team's coaching staff, and we have not heard anything in regards to a replacement as of yet. Chain had joined the Spitfire when GC Busan was acquired by the Spitfire owner Cloud9 back in October of 2017. And of course, like we talked at length about, the trajectory that London Spitfire had. London would eventually go on to finish with the third best map differential in the regular season, and of course, as we saw, they defeated the Philadelphia Fusion to win the inaugural season of the Overwatch League. Now, that being said, I'm of two minds on this. So, one, what exactly do you need to do to, maintain your spot on that championship roster? And two, obviously, there's another Korean team out there that is doing a pretty big overhaul. They just made a pretty big acquisition with, the most handsome main tank in the league. And, if I remember correctly, Slambo, for, what felt like an infinite number of maps in a row, GC Busan would just absolutely destroy Lunatic High. So could we see Chain heading over to head coach the Seoul Dynasty for season 2?
I think that might be an almost perfect marriage, and I'm sure he would love to kind of return to that home country sense of pride. And I personally think this is probably, to your point, a coach who knows the roster fairly well coming into it, even though he hasn't coached directly for all these players. He's coached against these players, and sometimes that will really help them shore up some of their weaknesses. So I can see this being a nice fit. But let's just say, Totem, hypothetically, that doesn't happen. He's going to be fine. We're going to need a lot of qualified coaches coming into this next season with the expansion teams coming. So even if this potential, I like it. I think it'd be great for Seoul, but if that doesn't happen, there is going to be a home for Chang, and it's not going to be hard. It's going to be open season for any talented and proven coach anywhere in this league.
Yeah, I mean, players and coaches have gone on record to say that coaching is the hardest position to fill right now because there just isn't that level of experience out there. And he is one of the few that has championship experience, not only on London, but he was also on GC Busan when they won Apex. They run the Apex Premier. So he is one of the most successful coaches out there. So he will easily find a spot, whether it's Soul, maybe Fisher likes what he dealt with before, or maybe Fisher doesn't want him because maybe he's the one who ended up cutting Fisher. Who knows? Like there's all kinds of stuff, but it seems like a lot of these players and coaches, regardless of what happens with teams and transfers and stuff, are pretty close. So I wouldn't say that would most likely happen. Like, I think teams will evaluate what they need, and I think he would be a really good fit on Seoul. He's clearly gifted. He knows Fisher. Like Slambo said, he's coached against them very well. So, that could just be one more notch in Seoul's belt for a strong season 2. We don't got to worry about him. He'll find a job easy. I'm more curious to see what London is going to do. Like they initially suffered from too many cooks in the kitchen, which Seoul also suffered from. So maybe we'll see a drastic shift in both teams, and maybe London will just continue with 2 coaches, and maybe Seoul will continue with a fewer amount of coaches, and we'll see, a different shift in season 2 for the Korean teams.
Yeah, because London was a team that had, they lost one of their coaches kind of like mid-season when Bishop had left the team. Really no reason given with that. Same with this one in particular. So, that's already 2 coaches gone from this London Spitfire crew. And Bishop is another one of those names that, could be coming in quite a bit as well. In regards to like recruitment processes. But anyways, speaking of recruitment, we do have another team out there that has, freed up some spot for some eventual free agent sign-ins. That is none other than the San Francisco Shock. So the Shock have actually dropped 3 of their players. So parting ways with the Shock are IDDQD, the player, not the team. I feel like I have to say that every time, just for nostalgia purposes. Nomi and Dak. So IDDQD, he only played 1 map during the inaugural season, which really came in a meaningless game. I mean, let's be honest, it was like the last map against the Shanghai Dragon, so really not much to play for in regards to that in particular. Dak had started the season as the Shock's main support, and then, the Mercy meta happened, and, Dak was kind of the run-in gag joke of Mercy players in the Overwatch League. And, we definitely memed that one up quite a bit, and, we later saw that he was benched in favor of Moth, who was signed for the Shock in the mid-season. And it's kind of like a similar case for Nomi as well, because Nomi started as the Shock's main tank in the first half of the season, and then once Super turned to 18 before the start of Stage 3, Nomi saw significantly less time, so he sat out for the majority of Stage 3, and he sat out of all of Stage 4. So, with these moves, the Shock roster went from 12 players down to 9. So, the real question is, so the Shock were basically playing the long game, right? They're like, okay, we're just gonna wait. Sinatra will be able to play midway through the season. We'll get Super, into the mix, and then we'll see where we're at from there. And, they picked up Architect. It took a little bit of time to, get his feet underneath him and, work out that synergy. And I felt like overall, we didn't really get to see the Shock at, their true potential. Now, that being said, are there any key aspects of their game that you guys feel like they need to address in regards to, upcoming potential free agent signings for this team?
That's a tough one. I mean, obviously they let go of pretty much one of every role, so they definitely want to keep their options open. Oddly enough, I actually think right now they're in need of consistent DPS players, because even as good as Sinatra has been, he hasn't been consistent. There has been no level of DPS consistency on their team start to finish. Even when they were playing the Baby Bay game, put all eggs in that basket. It's just some games they perform and they look good. Other games, they don't even show up. And, initially we kind of wrote that off where, okay, maybe their support line's lacking. Maybe their tank line's lacking. So the DPS didn't have room to work. Super gave them plenty of room to work in season 4 or stage 4. And they looked better, but they still couldn't perform to the level of other DPS roles. So I feel like the Shock need to find a little bit more consistent DPS, maybe get Architect with somebody. That's the 2 basically, that's the two roles I think they need to fill the most. I'm sure they're also probably going to look for a main support just to kind of test the waters. Moth was good, but he wasn't, anything amazing. He was serviceable. He was obviously an upgrade from Dak, but that's, again, not saying much because of as much we mean. The only support we saw worse than Dak all season was Sideshow. That's the only way I can put it. So overall, I'm sad to see these three players go. IDD QD hits me the most. I know it hits Slambo the most, but I've watched him since the beginning, and he's a phenomenal player. But I feel like we're going to see a lot of these Gen 1 players like IDD QD, Taimu, Tavik, players that kind of struggled in Season 1. Some of them will probably transition to coaching roles. Maybe not quite as quickly as Grim Reality did, but we'll see them transition at least a little bit. So I think there's a future in the league for a lot of these players. But yeah, the Shock have an interesting Season 2 to work up to.
Man, it kind of took one of my last was the coaching bit. So, dead on, I think, when you mentioned that. So what I was going to do is kind of break it down, one at a time. So I think that there are kind of, three options for these new free agent players. So one, and that's focus on a new hero. So maybe try to find a hero that's been released recently or maybe had a rework and really try to make your mark on that hero because you still have experience with an Overwatch League roster. So you will be of some value to a team, even as a backup who can kind of walk and coach guys through the psychological bits and, be a motivator on the team, even if they're not a starter. So maybe just try to find your way onto the field by playing something that no one else does, right? So that's one option. And I think that pretty much is going to go to Dak just because in that support space, there's not as much competition and he might be able to really, dig his nails into Moira, even though she's not really been that great, or a Brigitte, for instance. The other option is move to coaching. I think that's the IDD QD route. I don't think that he has enough time right now, age-wise, left to really turn the corner and compete with some of these young up-and-coming DPS. So it may be time to, head for the hills and really coach and help out in this league as much as you can. And then Nomi, the last option, I think this one is probably the toughest, but really just focus on Reinhardt right now. Winning those Reinhardt duels is extremely important. And currently in this meta, I know he's getting countered quite a bit and juggled around and flopped and stuff, but there just needs to be some way to try to make your mark in that main tank space by just improving your core play on one of the core heroes and really trying to find a spot on one of the new expansion teams for Season 2. So yeah, three options, three players. I think they fit those three players pretty well storyline wise, but I mean, any free agent player between now and Season 3, I think those are like the three main routes. Obviously they can go. So
yeah, and I feel like with IDDQD, it was just a case of, well, the heroes that he particularly plays just didn't really fit the Overwatch League meta. So that definitely put him at a disadvantage already. And, just because of how long he's been around the scene, he's definitely seen as more of like a mentor. So, I think that transition to, coaching role, whether it is just like maybe like hit scan specific or just a player coach, is definitely the route that he needs to go. But I think Nomi will have a pretty good chance at finding a new team just because that main tank position is going to be one of the more sought after ones, just due to the fact that, kind of like that frontline battle has been one of the key aspects of the game that a lot of these teams are focusing on, and some of those players have the biggest impacts in the game. So definitely we'll be keeping an eye on this, as well as, all the other free agent sign-ins and, player releases as the windows open and close. But in other news, along with the All-Star Weekend, they also had given out the Dennis Havelka Award, and, really not that big of a surprise in regards to who actually received the award, and the award was given to the player that they felt made a positive impact on the community, and it was Dallas tank player Mickey, who ended up receiving the award. So the award honors Internet Hulk, a former Team Envy player who had passed away last November at the age of 30. So, when that news broke, it was a pretty tough moment for the Overwatch community as a whole. They did the Hulktastic Cup, which was really just an emotional day altogether, and it was pretty. It was how should I say this? It was interesting seeing like the casters in a different like mindset, because they were a lot more loose and they weren't as restrictive in what they were saying, I think would be the best way to put it. And just sharing the different stories of Internet Hulk definitely brought a lot to that. And we got some pretty good Overwatch as well. But Internet Hulk was the reason that Mickey was even on Team Envy, who would later become the Dallas Fuel, because Hulk had scouted Mickey during the Overwatch World Cup in 2016 when Mickey was playing for Thailand. And really, like, that year Mickey basically was Thailand in general, that team was just absolutely in love with the camera, and they lit up the Overwatch World Cup that year. And Mickey, whenever he's on camera, he lights up the room, and he's really one of the happiest players in the league, and really was that beacon of positivity despite the various ups and downs throughout the Dallas Fuel season in Season 1. So, I'm not going to say like there were a ton of options in regards to, possible, recipients of the award, but really no surprise to me that it did eventually go to Mickey overall. But, they had a, pretty touching, video clip, going into this, and, this is going to be the first of many to come, hopefully. So I'm sure they will be bringing it back for Season 2.
Yeah, who else could it have been? I mean, all season, everybody's like, it's got to be Mickey. It's got to be Mickey. He kept a smile on his face through the trouble that was Season 1, like you said. He even at one point when Dallas was struggling the most during Stage 3, he went out and he said, "Don't be mad at the team. If you have to be mad at somebody, be mad at me." And he took that on his shoulders, and he did it with his usual joy. And you could tell that he was still upset, but he kept a smile on his face. And the whole time, no matter what, he just kept that positive attitude, that PMA, and he powered through it. And that there's something to be said, because you can tell in the interview, Dallas Fuel put out a video, and if you haven't watched that video, you should definitely go watch that video, because you get to see like Hastro talks about it. Basically, all the Dallas Fuel people talk about how instrumental Mickey was to their Stage 4 success, but just keeping the positive mindset, at least at a balanced level throughout the season. He deserves it. I mean, there's no other person. And like you said, there really weren't that many options. Like, the only person that really springs to my mind other than him is another former Dallas Fuel player, which is Custa, because he's the only other one that teams, Valiant have said it, the Fuel have said it, how instrumental he was at keeping a positive attitude. But beyond those two, it's hard to call. So I think Mickey was definitely the right choice.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much else to say. We were all assuming this. Everyone was assuming this. And it is extremely well-deserved. We constantly referred to him as such an important piece. But before we even heard all those things, we could just tell by the energy and the feels. And, I love this cheesy saying. I often tell it to people that are new at the company, or just when I'm, asked to give anyone any advice. It's really cheesy, but it's something that I truly believe in, and it's attitude equals altitude. And so I believe in Mickey that this award is really just a checkpoint in his Overwatch career, and he will go on to coach and inspire and be involved with the community and with the players for a long time. I feel like his altitude as a personality, as a figure in this league, has no bounds because of all the things that we're talking about. And, how unfortunate for, everything to happen for Internet Hulk, for Dennis, for this award to have to be a thing. It's kind of an unfortunate circumstance for us to be sitting here celebrating it. But I think that's what Internet Hulk would have wanted. And I gotta think too, guys, that all of us were assuming and guessing, but Mickey had his eyes on the prize too. He had a lot to thank Dennis for, and so when this award was announced, you got to believe that Mickey himself was like, "That's for me to take home to thank him for bringing me on to Envy in the first place." So I don't know why this makes me more emotional than most things, but it is a crazy ride we've been on, and just the announcement, I was crying. My wife was like, what are you watching? And I'm like, you wouldn't understand, but yeah, I legit was getting teared up when I saw the Twitch clip announcement. I was, yeah, obviously it said spoiler alert or whatever. I was like, yeah, right. We know who got this. So yeah.
Yeah, and what can't Mickey do? I mean, we've seen him as like a reporter. He was on the desk during the All-Star weekend.
He was great on the desk.
And he definitely gave the MVP nod to the right person for the for what many people would consider the right reason. Taking a shot. You never know. But anyways, let's go ahead. Let's jump into our main discussion as we talk about what went down this past weekend during all of the All-Star Weekend festivities. So first up, we had the Lucio Ball Showdown. Where we saw the, Atlantic division of Meko, Arc, and Poco going up against 3 tanks for the Pacific. We had Kagiri, Fate, and Fisher. So this one went to the Atlantic 2-1, and what I thought was interesting is for a lot of these game modes, when you were talking to the pro players, a lot of them were just like, yeah, I've never played this. So obviously, a lot of the pros aren't bothering with, the arcade mode or anything like that, unless it's maybe, deathmatch in particular. But Poco just straight out said, yeah, I've never played this, and then he absolutely crushed it in this particular series. And all in all, I for sure thought that, the Pacific would have had the advantage in this, just because, the tank players are just used to, using the space that's on the map, and with how open, the Lucio Ball arenas are, especially, well, I mean, all of them are, we saw the Busan one in this particular case, because that's this year's Summer Games one. I just thought that was going to give them the nod, plus, having the actual frog in Gagiri would have been enough to uplift them, but unfortunately, that was not the case. But what were your guys' thoughts in this match in particular?
Poco, man. I don't believe that he's never played this before. I basically was calling him Pele by the end of it, because especially when he had that walk-off goal at the end, it was insane. He hit some crazy shots. I don't want to sell the Pacific's team short, because Fisher hit some awesome shots as well. But, overall, it's Lucio Ball. I mean, come on. Anything can go wrong at a moment's notice. There are multiple times they would volley and it would just go wherever it wanted to.
Yeah, a little bit of randomness, certainly, a little bit of weirdness, and Poco, I have a crush on. I just feel like there has to be some kind of innate connection between hitting those diva bombs just ever so perfectly and also launching that Lucio Ball at the right trajectory to nail it. You know what I mean? There's got to be some instant geometry that goes on in Poco's brain that just doesn't go on in the average game player's brain or something, because that guy was just nailing it. Yeah, and he'd pop his ult and just bouncing it off the wall, the ceiling, and all 2 passes to himself to go in. It was beautiful plays. By the end of it, I was super impressed.
Absolutely. So next up, we had the 6v6 mystery heroes, and this is one that I was really anxious to see, because whenever we're playing arcade, we always talk about the RNG of this particular mode. Sometimes you can have really great comps, you can have 5 tanks paired with a Moira, and you'll just absolutely decimate your opposition. And then other times you get 5 supports and a Wrecking Ball, and then you're like, well, we can keep ourselves up, but we can't kill anything. And that was actually one of the comps that we got to see in this series. So for the Atlantic Division, we had an all-Korean team plus Muma. So we had Libero, Mono, Muma, Gesture, Fury, and Bedosian. Then for the Pacific, we had Kariv, Ryo Jaehan, Zunba, Bishu, Custa, and Space. And this one, again, went to the Atlantic Division with a score of 2-1. So, we got to see Nepal, we're going to see Ilios as well as Lijiang Tower. And the control was definitely not in favor of the Pacific, because they got shut out pretty bad, but, that's kind of to be expected with control in this particular game mode, just because, as long as, if you're able to, even get one ultimate, the snowball potential in Mystery Heroes is just through the roof. But, it's always interesting to see, some of the wacky sort of compositions that we get to see. And all in all, I love the fact that we got to see, this 5 support with the Wrecking Ball. I was like, okay, how exactly is this going to work? Are they going to be able to kill anything? Well, they were able to sustain just fine for, just a little bit. But, I love that, we got to see that flexibility, right? We got to see people playing heroes that they normally don't play. More so on this one in particular, we even saw people trying to, fall off the map, trying to, reset which character they're going to be, not knowing that, if you do fall off without, any assist from, an environmental kill, that you just respawn as that same hero. So, we got to see a bit of that too, so even the pros don't read the patch notes.
Nice try, Zumba. But yeah, I mean, the 5 support Wrecking Ball actually did fairly well, and somehow the Wrecking Ball still died first. He just threw, and then he ended up on Tracer, and they still won. But I mean, the standouts for me were definitely Custa on Bastion. He got him on one of the rounds on, I think it was Nepal, and he just tore through the Atlantic team had no answer for that. They tried to get close. It also didn't help that at one point they were running a double symmetric double Reaper into a Bastion, and no amount of teleporter could get them close enough. So, and Badoshan on the Doomfist, we're going to talk about Doomfist a lot tonight, but he was the first one that popped up, and he was popping in and out of windows on Ilios. He killed, I forget who was on Mercy at the time, but he killed him twice. He popped up, killed a Mercy, the other Mercy rezzed him, and then he popped up and killed him again. So he just, it was fun to watch. It's RNG, so you can't really put stock in the fact that Atlantic won, because they did overall get better comps most of the night. And even at certain points, certain players got their main heroes, which it gave them a huge edge. So it was just fun to watch. I mean, that's why it was there.
Certainly entertaining. All the points you guys touched on were highlights for certain, but what stood out to me was Custa on Junkrat on Nepal. I believe it was on Sanctuary, but he was on a 10 kill streak, was getting double and triple kills with a tire. He had 3 tires, I think. I was like, gosh. And then later he was on the Bastion, like you mentioned, and I was just like, Custa is a gamer, dude. It was just, yeah, I mean, that's what, really stood out to me. And it just really was so RNG. It was really for fun. It's like the home run derby. You get to see some cool stuff, but, I'm certainly not really putting a lot of weight into who won or lost the overall matchup.
No, not at all. It's arcade mode. I mean, it's
that's what I mean. It's arcade. It was certainly, like you said, you got to see some people's style on heroes you don't get to see them play on, and then you saw people get heroes. You're like, yeah, they're gonna be good, and then they just lose that character they're really good with. It was a lot of roller coaster for me, and I just feel like if Custa got Junkrat more, I would have been all Pacific all day.
Absolutely. So, it started off not that good for the Pacific, but we started to see a turn with the talent takedown. So this was basically, we had 2 teams that were drafted that contained, all of the Overwatch League casters and analysts. So for the Atlantic Division, we had Malik, Sideshow, Golden Boy, Mr. X, Doa, Uber, and Bren. And then for the Pacific, we had Reinforce, Crumbs, Zoe, Semler, Monte Cristo, Puckett, and Hexagrams. Okay, so first up, before we even discuss the actual match, we gotta talk about what had transpired leading up to the actual match, because if you guys have been on Twitter at all in the past week, you may have noticed a lot of the casters and analysts just, poking jabs at one another over on Twitter. and it was an absolute gold mine. I remember Uber was talking about Reinforce, talking about like how he was boosting his team's average SR by, up about 2,000. So he's gonna have all that pressure on him, and he's just gonna be too busy trying to make sure that the rest of his team isn't, jamming forks into power outlets to handle the rest of us. Well, so Reinforce attempted to DPS. I'm gonna say attempt because he was on the Sombra. That did not really work. And then he moved to Wrecking Ball, and then Pacific just ran with it. Like, there was nothing that the Atlantic Division could do at that point. But in regards to the matches, we did get to see a little bit of the Brenji, which was hit or miss. We got to see Puckett play a pretty mean Doomfist. Hexagrams basically filled pretty much every role on his team. Zoe was main support, playing a lot of Mercy. We got to see Sideshow throw in after, first couple of rounds. And, Malik played on stage with a controller, because he is a console player, which I thought it was interesting that they actually brought it on stage. I wasn't sure if he was going to do that, but I was glad to see it just because, that's what he's used to playing. Same with Golden Boy, but Golden Boy actually was playing with the keyboard and mouse, so I have to give him props for that. But all in all, yes, this was not, the most entertaining gameplay that we have seen, but just the amount of trash talk helped elevate this to just a height that we just haven't really quite seen yet, because we don't really get that fun sort of, lighthearted banter, just in everyday, Overwatch League. A lot of it might just be people memeing on Twitter, but, we never see it, in the interviews or things like that, so we don't get to see the callouts. We don't get to see, that certain animosity. And I feel like if the Talent Takedown proved anything, it's that there is a spot for it. And the fans were just eating it up.
Yeah, I mean, it all started with the beginning. I mean, you talked about the Twitter, but when the teams were able to introduce themselves, like Golden Boy introduced his team, and then he obviously introduced himself, and then Puckett introduced himself and his team. They were just trash talking beforehand. It actually felt like a WWE match. Like, they were on stage trash talking each other. They had handing the mic off to Reinforce, and it was great to watch. It was a lot of fun. And then when we actually got into the game, it looked good for Atlantic initially, and then, like you said, Reinforce switched to Wrecking Ball, and then they just bodied him. And I will give credit to Reinforce. He switched to Widow in one of the later maps and just destroyed them. They had no answer to him. So he kind of redeemed himself on the DPS front. Now, I don't know if that was poor positioning, because at one point Sideshow just walked in front of him 4 times in a row, I think. So I mean, Sideshow, he did okay, but he did so badly that they did an overall cast photo at the very end, and they still introduced him as Side Throw. So it was pretty bad. But beyond that, the Puck Fist, man, he was phenomenal. Even after the game, they were we had no idea he was that good. We didn't expect that. We thought he was just trolling us, and then he came out and he destroyed people on it. So it was a lot of fun. From Atlantic, there wasn't too many huge moments. I would say Mr. X was my standout on Atlantic, because he did pop off a few times on Widow, but beyond that, the Brenji was everything we expected it to be. He would come in, do one good thing, and then 2 bad things. So overall, it was just a lot of fun, and I think you're right. I think the smack talk made it.
Well, I feel bad because I told you guys for the show, I skipped out on the Talent Takedown, the Widowmaker, and Lockout so far. I plan on going back and watching all 3 starting tomorrow morning, but I'm a little bit more hyped to watch it now. And I just wanted to weigh in that I did see that Monte Cristo was on Twitter afterwards, really proud of his performance and really curious whether Reddit noticed or not. It was quite pathetic. And so I'm interested to really contrast Monty's thoughts about his play and then what really happened, because it sounds like Reinforce just made so much space for everyone else on his team to look real good So, but we'll find out. I guess we'll see.
It's easy to look good as Reinhardt when you have a wrecking ball in the enemy team's back line and the other Reinhardt doesn't know which way to go.
That's kind of what I'm deducing so far.
Yeah, and there were multiple occasions where Monty would just like only be holding his shield up and like not moving. Like it's just like, I'm just gonna hold this up until it breaks, basically. But yeah, Reinforce was definitely the hard carry. And actually, like even before the game even started, he was carrying his teammates during the walkout, which was pretty funny.
A bit of foreshadowing for everybody in the audience.
Literally carrying them. And there was one point where Malik was playing Zarya, and he was like holding on to a Graviton Surge for what felt like an eternity. So that definitely
3 minutes.
He
held on to that grab for almost 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they got something at the end of it, which even the casters acknowledged. Like, if he got nothing, that would have been even worse. But he did get, like, they did pull off the combo. So, at least that's something. But yeah, it was
the combo was really good too. At least they got, like a 5k out of it. But yeah, like I was like, okay, is he gonna keep dying? Okay, is he gonna switch? No, he's not switching. Okay, when's he gonna use it? And then
the controller doesn't have a switch hero button apparently.
Yeah, that must be what it is.
or an ultimate button.
Anyways, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the 1v1 Widowmaker tournament. So I have to say, like, this did not turn out how I was expected in some regards. We saw Carpe defeat Saya Player in the first particular quarterfinals. That one ended 7-6. Striker defeated Pine 7-6. On the other side of the bracket, we saw Soon defeat Architect 7-5. Surefour defeated Fleta 7-5. Then moving into the semifinals, Carpe defeated Striker 7-3. Surefour defeated Soon 7-6. And then in the finals, we saw Surefour defeat Carpe 9-6 to win the 1v1 Widowmaker tournament for the Pacific Division. Okay, so Pine drops in the first round. The Surefour Fleta one was a lot more one-sided than I was expecting. Striker, though, going up against Carpe just felt so disjointed when you compare it to, Carpe's other matches. Like, I don't know what was going on with Striker at that point. Obviously, like, he was trying to play very aggressive, because a lot of his, like, snipes were, practically within melee range almost. But, he had a couple of instances where, he was having some issues, kind of staying on the map, which didn't help him either. So that was the thing.
No, I mean, overall, all the matches were very close. I mean, most of the matches were decided by 2 points or less, with a few standouts here and there, like the Striker falling to gravity a few times. But overall, I was actually expecting Surefour to win, because if you followed Surefour, you know that one of his strongest points is Widow v Widow. Some of the stuff he struggles on is like positioning and stuff like that. But if he's in a Widow v Widow duel in a vacuum, he typically knows how to outthink them. I thought Pine would have done better, but I guess Striker just bamboozled him with his, point blank range shots. Like, Pine had no answer for that. There's no amount of flanking that's going to get you away from a Widowmaker that's right next to you. Carpe wasn't a surprise. Carpe was my pick to win on the Atlantic side, like, easily. Just looking at who he was playing against there, unless it was a huge upset, I really didn't expect it. In the Pacific side, actually went down fairly similar to what I expected. I actually didn't expect Soon to beat Architect.
Right.
I actually thought Architect would have taken it, but Soon came out like, cool as a cucumber and just sat there and took Architect to school. And then, Surefour turned around, and that was actually the most intense match for me, was Surefour versus Soon, just because they both played passively, and then they'd both play aggressively, and then they would, dance around and stuff like that. And then the final was heated, because it was like every map was something different. Like they tried different stuff, and then Sureforce just winning shot just capped off like the Widowmaker tournament for me, because he literally just grapples off the map and hits the shot as he's falling to his death, and you can see it on his face. Like you just see the relief and like the surprise that happened. It was the perfect way to end a Widow 1v1 tournament.
Yeah, it was basically like the look of, it's a good thing I hit that, because I would have lost it there.
He would have been Striker at that point, because Striker tried that same exact shot pretty much and just fell off the map.
Yeah, usually that's something we expect to see during our game nights, and not during like the professional setting. Because that has happened. But all in all, like, I really enjoy the Widowmaker 1v1 tournament. My only problem was with the format of it. So having it be like the first to, X number of kills, like, I felt like these series were just too drawn out. So that was really like my only complaint. I did find them really entertaining. I just would like to see them shorten the series overall. But man, like, I know a lot of people are probably going to have issues actually spectating the Widowmaker 1v1 just because of the amount of movement and just crouch spamming that we saw with, the Widowmaker dance trying to turn your back to your opponent so they can't actually
ballerina
hit you in the head.
dance.
Right. So if you haven't watched it, just keep that in mind, because, it might cause a little bit of nausea for some viewers, but all in all, like, Surefor really came through, and yeah, like, absolutely, I think soon, out of all of the people in the tournament, surprised me the most. And I just remember, like, when he opened up the series against Architect, and, we could see, like, him, like, shooting the gun on the side, just, like, trying to get into Architect's head, because it was just instant, like, right off the bat, and that was pretty much, that set the tone for that particular 1v1. So, for sure, man, he looked good. Like, he was on point, and I feel like out of all of the players in that tournament too, he had some of the more flashier snipes as well.
Yeah, and personally, again, this is one of the ones that I missed, but I'm looking forward to watching it. And I really would not have put my money on him. He's always been a top-notch sniper player, but there's just a lot of talent, in particular Korean talent, in that tournament, and just very surprised that Surefor was able to outlast, if you will, some tough competition, but good on his part.
Well, on his side of the bracket, he only had to beat one Korean.
Yep.
So there is that.
That's okay. So that's fair. But I meant, like, there was others in the bracket around him, right? I know he didn't draw them, and he got the meta dog.
Mm-hmm.
Mo Fleta, not better. What's up? No. Okay. All right. Now.
Just the Atlantic Division has more Korean snipers. But yes, I get what you're saying. But that's because, like, they split it between, they had one side was the Atlantic, and then the other side was the Pacific.
Okay.
So it wasn't it wasn't Atlantic versus
wasn't
Pacific
a
for
free
each
for
one.
all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
But anyways,
got it.
moving on.
Catching me up, Totem. Thank you.
Absolutely. Next up, we had the lockout elimination. So for the Atlantic team, we had a group of Koreans plus Poco, so very similar to, the Luciable showdown. So we had Sabiobi, Prophet, Gamzu, Poco, Ark, and Jonak for the Atlantic. And then for the Pacific, we had Sleepy Agilities, Kariv, Big Goose, Mickey, and OGE. So this one went 3 maps. We saw Oasis, Necropolis, and Castillo, and this one went 2-1 in favor of the Pacific. Okay, so Lockout Elimination is another one of those game modes where, not a lot of these pro players have actually played. Spider, was there anything kind of, out of the ordinary in regards to the comps that you saw that might have, taken you by surprise, or was this basically just what you would consider to be, standard-looking lineups? Because, we saw a little bit of, self-sustained comps. We saw, a little bit of, dive. We saw some teams, really even, save and die for, the very end, too, just for it to be something to fall back on. But what were your thoughts on the comps that we saw?
It was pretty standard lockout elimination. You go through what you think you're good at, and then you make adjustments knowing what the enemy team has. The one real standout was like you said, the Pacific team really liked their turtle comps. Like there were multiple times, especially on Necropolis, where they would just sit and spawn with like a shield and wait for the Atlantic team to just come in and fight them. And it worked a little bit, but the Atlantic team having such, I would guess, a predictable enemy made it easier for them to win that round. But overall, there really wasn't anything crazy. I did think I think it was Castile where one of the teams went dive and they got immediately destroyed. Like they're like, oh, they're running just straight dive, it's just standard dive, and then it was like boom, dead. And they're like, oh well, I guess dive didn't work out for them that time. So overall, lockout elimination was actually probably my least favorite of these because it by that third, fourth round, what you're going to see. You're going to see a troll comp, and they're going to have to make the best of the worst, at least in the current meta. And that's what it came down to. I mean, the second two maps went to 5, so you're seeing Torbjorns, you were seeing Symmetras, stuff like that. You see at the end of lockout elimination, and while it's entertaining, it does get a little boring at the end because those maps are so small. There's not enough like blank routes. There's not enough surprise routes. Like, sure, on like Numbani, you could do some fun things with Symmetra, but on Castile, where they can know where you are and see where you are, what are you really going to do other than just spam orbs and hope you get lucky?
Got it. That might be one that I'm not rushing to catch up on tomorrow then.
Yeah, definitely. But moving on Sunday, we actually had the official All-Star game. And this was a 5-map series, and this one went to the Atlantic. So we saw Kings Row, we went to Rialto, we saw Horizon Lunar Colony, Ilios, and Route 66. So Pacific picked up the first win, and then it was all Atlantic all the time. And, we got to see a little bit of everything in this series. We got to see Symmetra, finally, Symmetra 2.0. Pine was actually the first one to play Symmetra in this case. We actually got to see Muma on it as well, so, it wasn't a perceived troll pick like it would have been otherwise in the Overwatch League. We got to see Ryuji Han on the Doomfist, just absolutely killing it, which was amazing. And, man, that lit me up, seeing Ryuji Han on the Doomfist, because we typically don't get to see him play, other roles, really. Usually it's either, Zenyatta or Ana. Sometimes, Winston, depending on how their main tanks are doing, but, we probably won't have to worry about that moving forward, because, they got Fisher, so that chapter's behind us. But, we saw the Tracer, we saw the Doomfist, both, here and on the Mystery Heroes, and I love seeing, these pro players playing on things that we just don't normally get to see. So, we saw a ton of Wrecking Ball. We got to see a ton of Symmetra, we got to see a ton of Doomfist, and all in all, Atlantic definitely styled on the Pacific in this one, and Route 66 for the Pacific, they were basically like, okay, we're going to come out on our attack, we're going to run 6 supports. Okay, that didn't work. What are we going to switch to? Alright, that didn't work. Let's go the opposite end of the spectrum. We'll beef it up a bit, right? We'll come out with 6 tanks. That didn't work either. But definitely, we got to see a little bit more troll comps in the actual All-Star game, which I felt like was definitely needed. But for the most part, at least initially, we got to see a lot of players playing their main roles. So, we had the serious aspects of it at times, and then we got the more, loose and, more fun-oriented shenanigans that you would come to expect with the All-Star game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the All-Star game's all about, is you get those little flashes of, competitiveness that these players are very competitive, so they do want to win, but then they're also like, this is just for fun. Like a few of my highlights were map 2 Rialto. We got to see the whole LA Valiant squad. Mm-hmm. Like, that was the team, and then they just lost to a team of Koreans. Like, it was like the regular season all over again.
Exactly.
And then Horizon Lunar Colony, who I think it was Atlantic that ran it. They ran with 6 DPS mains.
Mhm.
So we were like, okay, what are we gonna do? And the first set of rounds went pretty standard. Pacific just blew through them, and then Atlantic did eventually cap both points. So the second time around, the Atlantic team says, "All right, whatever. We're just gonna run 6 DPS," and they just destroyed the Pacific team. Like the team had no answer for that. So it was amazing to watch. But you had touched on like the Ryujay Honk Doomfist. Muma got to play Widow. Like those are definitely some highlights. Ilios was funny because Atlantic like doubling down just played 6 main tank mains. Like they did like, all right, all the DPS players out, and all the tank players in. So touching on what Slambo said earlier, we got to see Poco play Mei, and he was actually very good at Mei. So I think I am with you in developing that crush on Poco because he is phenomenal on like everything. So and then Gaguri had the thought like, well, we're playing against 6 tank mains, so I'm just gonna play Reaper, and she actually did really well on Reaper. Like it was fun to watch. I mean, overall, like this whole game, like the serious moments, the trolly moments, Jonak playing Fan the Hammer McCree, like he was literally just walking around Route 66, just like banning the hammer, banning the hammer, banning the hammer. Like even when nobody was around, like he would just ban the hammer, roll, fan the hammer. It was hilarious. So this is, like you said, there were other parts of the weekend that I found more enjoyable, but this was definitely everything that I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, win, lose, or draw, both teams just kind of had a positive vibe about them. It just didn't seem like there was that tension that we would normally see after some of the matches during the regular season, or definitely in the playoffs. A couple players that stood out to me: Custa on Zarya. It's a pretty dirty Zarya play on Rialto, if I remember correctly. There was I was so excited at first when Pine switched to Symmetra on Horizon, or started out on defense as Symmetra. I was really looking forward to that. But by the end of it, it was Pine on the Doomfist just soloing everyone and like basically winning a couple pushes for his team. And I was like, all right, Pine, let's start with the Doomfist next time. Let's not go Sim again. And then counter to kind of Totem, you mentioning, you get to see players on some weird stuff, and certainly that was the case. But it was also kind of refreshing to see, like, for instance, Agilities get to be on Genji for a while, and get to be on Genji with a bunch of people he's not normally surrounded by, against people he doesn't normally play against, and kind of again, that relaxed environment. Sometimes when you see those comfy picks for players, you get to see them really show off because they're playing against people who aren't that comfortable, So again, you get to see some interactions like that that are fun. And it was weird to see Fleta as a main tank. It just felt weird, just on paper. Just I even felt icky saying it. That's all I can say.
I actually made note of that he had 3 tank mains on his team, and he ended up playing main tank, and I was like, wow, that's
Why?
like ladder. That's exactly like ladder. Like there's
Dude.
He did really well though. I'll give it to him.
He did that, but that's why I'm diamond, like low diamond right now, is because I'm just sick of being forced into a box because my profile was public. So now I played way too much of everything else, and now I'm terrible. So anyway, I digress.
Well, just speaking of levels of play, you bring up Diamond, but we did see, a little bit of Grandmaster play in regards to a certain off-tank from the London Spitfire on Ilios, because we got to see Fury coming out with the Torbjorn, and of course, they were running in Ana with this comp, and we got to see the first ever nano boost hammer kill with the Torbjorn, and it just so happened to be against Kagiri. So, there is always a first time for everything. And it took a couple of attempts to actually get that kill, because they were going for it on a few occasions. Second time was a charm. But, that was definitely, the play in particular throughout the All-Star game that just the internet just blew up over it. It's just not something you're, accustomed to seeing in the kill feed there. So that was definitely pretty cool. But all in all,
Thanks to my, I've forgotten that, but now I can't unsee it. Thanks, appreciate it.
Yes, I'm sure somewhere that Minkachu was smiling as he saw that. But all in all, like, definitely it was a fun series. Atlantic stood tall. Which, I mean, I can't say that I'm surprised by that just based on the fact that Pacific, kind of across the board throughout the season, just wasn't particular, like, great. They definitely had their fair share of struggles.
Yeah, I was going to say, Totem, real fast. Sorry to interrupt you again, but one thing the Atlantic division had going for it was all those New York Excelsior players.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, I mean that is true. I mean they did have the majority of the team, but the Pacific also had the Valiant. Yeah, no, it's not the same. I know.
Not the same. It's not the same.
And it just shows like you can have all of one team, but if they're an above average team, they're still not going to beat a hodgepodge of all stars, especially if they're all Korean.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was during the talent takedown that I think it was Bishu said that Sideshow did okay, but he would have done much better if he was Korean.
Mm-hmm. That is absolutely true. But anyway, so with the All-Star Weekend wrapping up, that is officially the end of the inaugural season of the Overwatch League. So what exactly does that mean in regards to Overwatch esports? Well, we have the World Cup going on. That will be returning here very soon. The next group stage is the Los Angeles group stage, so we'll get to see, Team United States. We'll get to see Fusion University's Zachary looking to bring home the gold for Team USA. And, we'll also get to see Team Canada. We'll see whether or not, a certain former pro tank gets to compete, depending on whether or not he's banned.
Don't bring him up. Don't do it.
I know you're just waiting on bated breath and just waiting for that suspension, just so we don't see him. And I wonder, I'm just curious to see what would happen if that were the case. Like, would they be allowed to have a substitute? I don't know. But anyway, so, there's a ton of contenders still going on. We got the finals for contenders for, quite a few regions. We got the World Cup, so there's definitely stuff on the horizon, so be sure to keep note of that. And of course, we'll be talking about the World Cup and even some of the contender stuffs in the weeks ahead. But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and close it out for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to leave us a positive review over on iTunes. We're always looking for ways to help improve the show and make for a better listening experience for you. So, expect, a little bit more speculative discussions in regards to like player sign-ins, what we would expect certain teams to be looking for in regards to improving for Season 2, who we'd like to see move in or getting traded, things like that. And of course, we'll have World Cup discussion once, USA goes undefeated and, beats Canada. So that would be insane. We can hope. I don't know, it depends on how much Mangachu shows up